This is really kind of calls back to what we started talking about earlier. Like if you were watching some of the earlier sessions in the career track, you might recall I mentioned that one of the questions on everybody's mind today is probably, how do I get my first job in security, right? We already had a really great talk on the first part of that question. It's like, how do you find the open positions that you want to apply for? But now we knew we wanted to also give you some good advice on the next part of that, which is once you've already found it, how do you actually convince employers that you're the person they want to hire? So our next speaker is Lesley Carhart. She's a principal threat analyst at Dragos, which is an industrial security company. In addition to her many security talents, she's also very well known inside the industry for her resume advice, whether it's, coming from her tweets, her blog, she's done lots of podcast interviews. And she's also done a lot of resume workshops and resume clinics at various information security conferences over the years. She's helped a lot of folks hone their resumes and navigate that process of applying for and getting their first security job. So I'm really pleased to have her here today to talk to you about that. Welcome, Lesley.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Okay, so all right. So hi, everybody. My name is Lesley Carhart. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, David. I really appreciate it. If you all haven't met me, what do I do professionally? Well, I work for a company called Dragos. And at that company, I am a principal digital forensics and incident response analyst. And I do that specifically on industrial control systems. But that's really not why I'm here today to talk to you. In the next slide, I'm going to talk to you about a number of things I am not. So let's start out with why I'm here talking to you about getting a job and writing your resume today. Well, first of all, I've been doing this for a long time, longer than I'd like to admit now. I've been in IT for well over 20 years, coming up to a quarter century now. I've been doing security for well over a decade. So I see a lot of resumes. I've hired a lot of people. I've worked as a SOC lead and I've run an incident response team at a very large corporation. So seen lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of cybersecurity resumes for the last decade or so. Hired a lot of people, to what a lot of people know, unfortunately. What else do I do besides that? Well, I run a conference called PancakesCon. I mentor a lot of junior people on various things. And I run a bunch of cybersecurity resume clinics. There is a wonderful GitHub from handle Miss Bat, which provides this wonderful framework for running your own resume clinics at cybersecurity conferences or IT conferences. And I've worked with her to run a number of these clinics. I've run a number on my own, and I've helped dozens and dozens and dozens of people with their resumes over the years. Now, can you hit the next slide, please? Thank you. What am I not? Well, I'm not an English major, unfortunately. I would have really loved to have been one. That would have been a wonderful career too, but that's not the way I went with my life. I am not also a certified professional resume editor. There's actually, can you believe it? There's actually certifications for that. That's a professional job. There's things like the CPRW. There are professional certifications, and this resume editing and editing professional hiring documents is an entire field. The people who do that they've studied that for an extended period of time. They are professionals at it, and I am not claiming to be one of those people. I've got to put that caveat in because my cousin is a professional editor, and I don't want her to murder me. What do I care about? Though, why would you want to hear from me as well as a professional editor, which you should have as a person who's trying to get a job or increase their career path in cybersecurity? Well, because the editors that are out there today can't necessarily tell you what hiring managers want to see on a resume. They can make them wonderfully formatted, very readable. They can correct spelling and grammar. They can help you deal with all kinds of problems that come up in general professional resumes, but they can't tell you what needs to be on your cybersecurity resume and why cybersecurity hiring managers or HR professionals at cybersecurity companies might be tossing your resume out. So that's why I run these clinics. It's not because I am going to fix every spelling error or stylistic error in your resume. It's because people are missing things on their resumes that are causing them to be filtered out as candidates. They are also being discarded by hiring managers who, like me, are probably reading 30 to 50 resumes at a time for a single position. And so I care about content and readability at scale for hiring managers. So making sure the right things are on your resumes and that somebody's going to see them in a quick and efficient and effective manner. I will say again, and I'm going to say this throughout this talk, you should be using a professional and certified resume editor as well. It's good to do both things. You should be both going to a professional editor, having them rewrite and edit your resume, and then you should be going to a hiring manager who's seen a lot of resumes in cybersecurity at something like one of my clinics or somebody else who's running a resume clinic at a conference. You should be going to one of those people as well, so that they can make sure that all the content is there and that everything that a cybersecurity hiring manager is actually present on the resume. Now, some caveats on this talk. So first of all, something that a lot of people aren't aware of. There are different types of resumes out there in the world. I am not going to talk about CVs, especially global CVs. There are many different formats for this document around the world, and they are very, very, very different, including content that is an absolute no-no and things that are expected on the resume. So when I'm talking about this today, I'm talking about United States and Canadian resumes for the most part. They're very different, and there might be some differences in what's expected to be on international resumes. US federal government resumes, also an entirely different format. If you are going to apply for a federal job, you should be seeing a resume editor who is an expert at writing federal government resumes. Completely different format, completely different requirements. All right. All right, so at this time, I would love for you all to go get your resume. I told you to do this in the hallway channel, but maybe you didn't see it. So I'm going to give you, we can play the Jeopardy song or something. Please go find your resume. It's going to help you a lot to get things out of this talk. You don't have to, you can just sit here and watch this, but if you have your resume to follow along, you're going to get a lot more out of the things I'm going to tell you now. We're going to walk through different sections of your resume and the content that should be present, as well as things I really do and really do not want to see on a resume. And so everybody's checking in that they got their resumes. Thank you very much, everyone. All right. All right, so we've done our little resume break. Hopefully you knew where the file was. Keep looking if you haven't found it. All right, so first of all, resumes have trends and fashions. So once again, I will go over the caveat that I am not a professional certified resume editor. Over the last 20 plus years that I have been in the technology business, resumes have changed drastically. What we put in various sections of the resumes, the way we title those sections, the introductions to resumes, the stylistic format, the margins, the spacing, the fonts, those have all changed. There are styles and fads in resumes. This is again why you need to be seeing a professional editor. So I'm not really going to talk about fads so much. I'm going to talk about content. Now, the first thing that we need to think about when we're writing our resume is that it's going to be filtered by both computers and humans. So there's multiple biases in play here too. So first of all, your resume is going to be eaten up by some HR application. So most jobs you apply for today, unless you're talking directly to a human at, say, a networking event or something, you're going to go to a website. You're going to make an account, you're going to upload a resume, you're going to fill out an application. That's pretty ubiquitous across many, many different fields right now. Now, what happens once your resume gets uploaded there? Well, there's usually some kind of automated filtering application on this, and it goes through your resume and it looks for keywords that are relevant to the job posting. If those keywords are not present in the resume, sometimes those systems are set to just toss out your resume and a human being never ever sees it. That happens at a lot of big companies because they deal with so many applications and haphazard applications by people who aren't qualified at all. So they could be looking for degrees, they could be looking for technical skills, operating systems, programming languages, scripting languages, security tools. They could be looking for certifications. So you've got to be cognizant of that, because especially in technical fields and in cybersecurity, there are a lot of ways to say things. So when you're talking about keyword filtering, you know, if you type out the name of your certification instead of the acronym and they're searching for the acronym, they might automatically discard your resume. So this is something we need to remain cognizant of throughout this talk as well. We're looking through our resume, is that the first line of filtering here is a computer that is not empathetic. It is not human. It is not the hiring manager. And then what happens after that? Well, usually there's some type of HR representative who looks at the pile of resumes, and they're doing the same kind of filtering. They're not cybersecurity professionals. They're looking for things that match the job posting. So they're looking for people who look qualified from an education and experience and certification and skill perspective. And they might not be really attuned to what's actually being said in the resume. So if you're not very precise, if you don't have the correct keywords there again, and you don't put things in a legible expected format, there's another layer where your resume can just be tossed out before it reaches a hiring manager. So that's really what's happening behind the scenes there, if you're not aware. So now, finally, just a caveat here is I'm going to talk about some biases that hiring managers, HR people, and even computer systems have about resumes and about candidates. These are not my biases. I hope they're not my biases, but they do exist and they're prevalent in the community. There's things like ageism, things like racism even out there. And granted, you probably don't want to work for organizations that have those problems, but they exist. And there are reasons why we do things on our resume in specific ways to avoid those biases. And so when I talk about those biases, please don't think that they are my opinions about candidates. They are not. I would love to see an incredibly diverse workforce. I think that that benefits us as a community, but we need to recognize when I'm talking about getting hired at other organizations that they're out there and they exist. Can you hit the next slide, please? Thank you. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about those computer filters and those HR systems that are going to eat your resume when you upload it. Okay, so this is a mistake that I see a lot of people make. And having received tons and tons of resumes through these HR systems over the years, I've seen this over and over again. Okay, so I said you're going to upload your resume and a computer is going to scan it for keywords, it's going to eat it. And then if it gets through HR, and in this hiring system, whatever vendor's hiring system it is, eventually it's going to get passed to me as a hiring manager. Now, how is it going to get passed to me or my boss or my team? Well, it's going to get passed to us through this automated system. And this automated system is going to process resumes in different ways. So oftentimes what that looks like is plain text conversion of the resume or conversion to a PDF. So whatever format, accepted format you uploaded, I'm not necessarily getting your original Word document or PDF for security reasons, as well as just standardized formatting and handling by the system. So oftentimes what I see happen is somebody has this really elaborate resume with like 10 different columns and like images all over and different fonts in each section, and it all gets blown away. And what I get is garble in the end. Now, I'm not telling you to not have a nicely formatted resume that looks good. Your editor is going to help you with that if you have a professional editor. They're going to do that in a sensible way, hopefully, if they are good at their jobs. But something that you need to do is you need to take your resume and convert it to plain text and see what it turns out into. You need to also print it, print preview it at standard margin sizes and see if it blows up. The more tables, the more quirky fonts you add, the more cutesy you get with your resume to stand out, the more likely it's going to explode and become illegible. So you have to balance those things. And as a caveat to that, it's okay to have two different versions of your resume for an application. So the first one is the one you upload to HR systems, which needs to make it through all this stuff, So it needs to be fairly simple and easy to convert to plain text, easy to print preview, easy to make a PDF of without anything exploding, without your tables getting all out of alignment and like craziness happening. And then have a printed copy as well that you say bring to interviews, hand to hiring managers, or send PDFs directly to hiring managers of. So you can have the pretty one too. Keep that in a PDF, of course, and printed format. Don't upload that to the HR system. But you can definitely do both if that's something that you want to do, if you really want to have the pretty, elegant, eye-catching resume. But you need to balance out those two things. And it's just, it's so frustrating when you're going through candidates and you just get like a page of garble that you know was this pretty resume once, and it's just all gone. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so let's start at the top of your resume. Hopefully you've now got your resumes in front of you. If you don't, I can't help you. So first of all, let's start at the top of your resume. Hopefully this is at the top of your resume. Your contact information. So your name, your phone, and your street address, and your email address. So I have seen people spell their names wrong on resumes, which is fascinating, but I've definitely spelled my own name wrong on emails and things, so I get it. Your phone number, make sure that that's correct. I would hate to not be able to contact a candidate because they've got like a landline that doesn't exist anymore on their resumes. And your street address. It's not always necessary anymore to put your street address on a resume, especially if you're applying for remote work. So that's another question for your resume editor, but I don't always see street addresses anymore. But if you are going to put it on there, make sure that it's correct. Your email address. Okay, so this is another one of those things where I talked about biases are not necessarily mine, but they exist and they are very potent and influential on people getting jobs. So some basic rules for your email address. First of all, you want it to be professional and modern looking, especially you're applying for a technical job and people want you to be up to date and keen and up to date with technology. So that there's a bias there already in our field. So that means no AOL or Yahoo addresses. I'm sorry. I know you've probably had the address for 25 years and it's your persona and you check it out every day, but just don't do it. There's a lot of ageism in our field and there's a lot of negative impressions of those companies as being insecure out there. So again, biases that are not necessarily mine, but they are very, very prevalent. Get those domains out of your email addresses. No college EDUs, unless you are like brand new in college right now. It's just better to not do it unless you're applying for like an academic job. That's an entirely separate thing, of course. But if you are applying for a commercial job, just better to not go with the EDUs. I've heard that from a lot of resume editors as well as hiring managers. Again, the ageism thing works both directions. You just don't want to have that impression of being the young junior college student, especially if you're a mid-career professional. No cute handles. This should be self-explanatory. Me as it goes by Hacks for Pancakes on Twitter. But yeah, that's not my email on my resume or my job applications. In fact, I don't even refer to my social media presence on my resume for better or worse, but yeah, no cute handles on your resume. I've seen some real whoppers out there, the like social media handles or the hacker handles or something. And like, yeah, maybe some hiring managers will think that's fun, but there's just too many biases out there. Like maybe the video game or the movie or whatever you're referring to in your handle, maybe the hiring manager just doesn't like it. Like I tell hiring managers that about like their postings that they put up. Sometimes they'll put like a joke about Star Wars or Star Trek or something in their posting. I'm like, what if the people who are applying for this job hate it? What if they don't like that intellectual property? But it's the same for you. Just keep it professional. It's just safer. And in terms of what they should be, self-hosted domains are fine. If you have like your own domain with your name in it or something, that's great. Although there's security questions about that today. So I hope that you have a secure email server up there behind it. And then Gmail and Proton Mail are just ubiquitously safe. So those are really safe alternatives for your email address, for your resume. And you might not want to put your personal email on your resume anyway, because you're going to get a bunch of responses from recruiters and stuff for the rest of your life once your resume's out there. So maybe you don't want to get recruiter spam sent to your personal email all the time forever. So that's something to think about too. Things you might want to include in that section as well. You might want to include your current populated LinkedIn if it's up to date and you like what it's representing about you. Make sure that you have a customized URL for your LinkedIn. Your GitHub, if that's applicable to what you do, sure, absolutely include that. And if you have a blog, people love to see your blog if it's relevant to the field in some manner. That's definitely a thing to include if appropriate. No alphabet soup. So what do I mean by that? So I'm speaking at a SANS conference, and I'm going to tell you to not put your certifications in your name, but this is a stylistic thing, and it might change over time, but it's really inappropriate on your LinkedIn and on your resume to have your name, comma, alphabet soup, 12 certifications. It's just not necessary. Your certifications should be in their own section in the resume. And nobody wants to read that. Like, it's just in the way of, first of all, the processing of your resume, the automated processing of your resume. And it just adds complexity and noise to the top of your resume. If I want to know about your certifications, I'm going to go down to the certification section that's going to have all the details about when you got them, when they expire, et cetera, what agency provided the certification. That's where I'm going to go. There is no need to put the alphabet soup long line. It just reads archaically today. Next slide, please. All right, so then there's a section beneath your contact details. So it's like some kind of introductory statement, right? Now, this is one of those fad trend things in resumes. So again, you need to be having a conversation with your resume editor. But here's what I'll tell you about those sections. There are 4 general things that can end up in them. So here are the 4 things. So first of all, there's a summary statement. That's like a couple sentences that talks about who you are as a professional, what you're good at, what you do, etc. So it's like, here I am, here's the elevator pitch on who I am. Then there's objective statements. So objective statements are combining that stuff in the summary statement, but also what you want to do next and why you're going to be good at it. So a lot of you have probably seen those. So they kind of define, I'm good at XYZ and I would like to pursue an opportunity in ABC. Then there's qualification bullets, and those are those quick, like buzzword filled bullets about yourself and why you're great. So I did these are the top 3 things I've done in my professional career. And then there's finally professional profiles, which are a combination usually of like all those things. So like I said, there's trends in these introductory statements. Your editor is going to pick some of these or one of them based on what's popular in 2021 or 2022, whatever. And you need to keep that up to date too, because it's going to start, your resume is going to start to look old to HR people, especially if you don't keep that up to date. Some editors today consider objective statements to be pretty archaic and out of date. They will tell you to move like your objective to your cover letter. That's fine, as long as it's there, as long as it's present somewhere. I like objective statements to exist somewhere, especially if you're like moving laterally into a different field. If you're making a major career transition, it can help me understand what the heck you want to do next and why you want to do it. So if you're like a software engineer and you have software engineering resume and you're trying to apply for my InfoSec job, the objective statement existing in the cover letter or on the resume really helps me understand, hey, I really do want to be applying for this job. I didn't just accidentally send you my resume. This is what I want to do next in my career. I want to become a cybersecurity professional with a specialty in software development or secure development. Okay, awesome. Now I understand. That helps me a lot in screening resumes. And I'd encourage you, this is another reason to talk to a hiring manager as well as your resume editor, because if you just like go to your resume editor, and this has happened to me before, and you're like, I don't know, I don't like talking myself up. I don't like writing resumes. Can you just like take this stuff off my LinkedIn and make a resume? What are they going to do? Well, without that context from you, they're going to stick a bunch of like generic buzzwords about your professionalism and your achievement as a XYZ technical professional, that you're proficient at modern technologies, and they're going to stick all these buzzword phrases in there, and we all know what they are. So try to work with your editor to make things that are actually meaningful as your bullets, if you're going to have like qualification bullets or buzzwords in your resume section. Now, some buzzwords aren't bad. They can help you get through HR screening. And again, that's something that your resume editor is going to advise you on. But, give them enough context and enough content to make bullets that are meaningful about cybersecurity, as well as just like generic, hey, you're excellent ABC adjectives about at doing technology stuff, because that doesn't help me at all as a hiring authority. Next slide, please. All right, work experience. So now we're down to your work experience. So the history of stuff that you've done professionally. So first of all, the basics. Do you use bullets and short sentences instead of paragraphs? It's so much more readable. Like, some people just give these big blurbs on what they did at a job, and it's just a paragraph after paragraph, and it's too much to read. Again, sometimes I'm reading 30 to 50 resumes at a time. Please bulletize your work experience. Please break it into meaningful chunks that talk about things that are meaningful and impactful that you did in your career, that help me understand where you're coming from and what you're good at. Please do that. It just makes things so much more legible. Again, a thing that resume editors will catch, but I catch all the time on resumes, I see this done wrong all the time, is like tenses. So, your current position should be written in present tense. You are doing XYZ. You do XYZ, unless it's like a project or something that you completed previously. The previous work experience, the jobs you held before that, are past tense. I did XYZ at this organization. I see this wrong all the time. So again, you should catch it. Your editor should catch it. It just looks unprofessional. And you should never use the words I or my in your resume. You should never be referring to things in the first person. Again, it reads as very unprofessional. It's always been out of fashion. It's not trendy. It's not stylish. It looks unprofessional. Next slide, please. A little bit more about work experience. It's possible to have too much, absolutely. And how much you put in each work experience section is stylistic, again, conversation to have with your editor. But in general, if you have like over 8 to 10 bullets for your current role, you are really overdoing it, and I'm not going to read them all. Again, we have too many resumes to go over. It's not anything against you or any other candidate. It's just their resumes can get overwhelming to read through in great quantities. And again, for the previous roles, we're going to decrease the number of bullets, hopefully to like 4 bullets max. And then when you get to your positions that you held a really long time ago, like over a decade ago, certainly over 20 years ago, there shouldn't be more than 1 to 2 bullets there. Again, this is stylistic, trends change, but that's kind of a general rule of thumb there. Don't overdo it. Try to keep things concise and meaningful. Another thing to watch out for is there being skills in your work experience bullets that are current and things that you know how to do, and they aren't listed in your skills section. I am not necessarily going to read every one of your work experience bullets. I'm going to start at certain parts of your resume. I'm going to look at, where you worked. I'm going to quickly summarize what your work experience is. I'm going to look at your skills to see if the skills I'm looking for are there. I'm going to look at your certifications, your education, things like that. But I'm not necessarily going to sit there and read every work experience bullet, especially if you're really overdoing it. So if you've got important, relevant technical skills in your work experience bullet and they're not reflected in your summary of skills, that's a problem. And are you providing adequate context in your work experience sections that I know kind of where you worked? Don't ever assume that I know the organization you're coming from. I see this a lot from people who work for government agencies or the military, where it's just kind of their whole world and they don't realize that other people outside of that organization don't know what it's like or what they do. They just make that assumption, and you can't make that assumption. Yeah, I've served in the military for many, many years, so I do know. But I have to sometimes gently tell my colleagues who are recently out of the military that like, nobody knows what that acronym is. Nobody knows what that organization is. Like, so your work experience bullets should definitely summarize like the size of the organization, the function of the organization, the size of your security organization in your previous roles, because nobody's going to sit there and Google it unless they're really interested in you specifically. So you should provide that context. Next slide, please. So here are some things that are really going to get you on your work experience bullets. So first of all, none of your work experience. So this is tune in if you've been tuning out and drinking your coffee. None of your work experience sections should read like a job posting. Okay. They should not read like a job posting. If you are reading the section for one of your jobs right now, and it looks like you could go to the site for that company right now, pull up a job posting for that position and read those words, those bullets, you have a big problem. Your work experience should be reflecting you, not the position. It should be reflecting what you accomplished there and why you were good at the job, your achievements in that role. That's what that work experience section should be reflecting. If you are reading that section right now for one of your job positions and it reads like the job posting for that role, you need to do a major rewrite. So there's this old military bullet writing adage. It's really popular in the Air Force, which is you put 3 things in award bullets or performance reviews, things like that, which are action, impact, and result. I don't really love that because it's not specific enough for me personally. So I made my own. Don't tell the Air Force. It's action, impact, and quantification. So what does that mean? So first of all, you've got your action. That is the job posting like thing. I did this thing. This is the action I complete or completed in this job role. But also impact. So impact is, what did this accomplish? Why was it important? Why did it matter? Why did I do a good job at this? And finally, quantification means numbers, 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 numbers. This is a result. It's, I saved $5 million, or I led a team of 30 people successfully, or I trained 20 analysts a month. That is meaningful. It gives context. It gives scope of what you actually accomplished. So that just doesn't mean, like, a lot of people will just tell you to like tack on adverbs or adjectives to your bullets and say, I was exceptional at XYZ. Okay, but tell me why you were exceptional. It's not bad to put those adjectives and adverbs in there, but really the important meat of the bullets is the impact and the quantification of that impact. So how well did you do that job, and what was the context numerically of what you accomplished? So how much money saved? How rapidly did you complete tickets? How many tickets did you handle a month well? Things like that. And what we ultimately want to convey in your work experience is how you did that job. So yeah, you've got the job posting. You know, Joe Bob could come in and do that job too. Why did you do better than Joe Bob? What are your achievements that stand out? What did you really accomplish over your time in that job role? That's what you're trying to convey there. You are selling yourself. So focus in your bullets as well on a narrative. You want to focus on a narrative in your work experience. So who are you? Where did you come from? What have you accomplished? And where are you trying to go? So focus your bullets on that trajectory. So make them relevant to the next position you want to hold in some manner or another. And finally, quantification. Numbers, numbers, numbers. Every work experience bullet should have numbers in it, if at all possible. Meaningful numbers about what you accomplished, your impact on the organization, the result of your actions. If you don't have numbers and you can't figure out any numbers to put in a work experience bullet, it might not be relevant to have on your resume. I will go that far. It might not actually be meaningful to a hiring authority. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's just a little example. I built this resume section just to give you an example of what I mean by that. So we have this person who worked for Contoso. They were the SOC manager. It's their current position. So here we see some examples of impact and quantification in their job role. I've highlighted some of them. So here they're giving context about the size of the organization that they worked in, and also the percentile of good feedback they got on their program from juniors. So if they didn't have this quantification and impact in here, it would read like a job bullet. It would say, yeah, they trained some people in tier 1 and tier 2. But here we're seeing that they did a really good job at that, and it was impactful to the organization. They received 92% positive feedback from junior employees. That matters a lot. In the next bullet, they talk about their incident response efforts, and they saved $11 million in potential lost production revenue by reducing projected downtime during an incident. That's huge. So once again, we've got the action, which is kind of the job posting like task that you accomplished, but also why it mattered, the context, the size, the scope, and you know, really quantified their success in this job role. Hopefully it makes sense. Next slide, please. All right, certifications. So that's an important section too. Some just quick gotchas here. So make sure that your certifications that are listed on your resume are current. I see people with expired certifications on their resume, or certifications I know expire with no expiration date on them all the time. So that begs a lot of questions. So make sure that your certs are current, and you talk about their renewal if that's relevant. And if you're working on a certification, especially if you're a junior person or you're transitioning into a new role, it's perfectly okay to add a projected completion date for a certification if you're planning to take the test in a month, etc. Okay, next slide, please. Your education section. Notice that this is lower on your resume. I've gone down a few sections now. Unless you're a student, your education section should generally be towards the bottom of your resume. And as you advance in your career, as you become more senior and your college education gets farther and farther away, it should keep going down. Some editors will go so far as to tell you to always put your education as like one of the last sections on your resume. Yeah, so not necessarily particularly relevant to senior or you know, principal level people, more relevant to junior people, of course, and entry level people. If you are currently in college, it's perfectly fine to put a projected completion date in your college degree as well. So what degree are you working on, and when do you plan to graduate? That's absolutely all right. In fact, I encourage it. But as you get older, as you spend more time in your professional career, it's okay to start removing those dates, removing things like GPA, removing things like academic honors or coursework. Those are no longer relevant after a certain point in your career. And that's, again, a discussion you can have with your resume editor. Like, when is it appropriate to take this stuff out? Do I have enough context in my work experience and my current certifications that it's no longer relevant? Now, of course, this is going to be different for people who are in academic roles or applying for academic roles, but for most of us working in the commercial sector, our academic achievements become less relevant as our professional achievements take over. So something to talk about, something to think about. If you really focus still on like graduating at the top of your class and having a 4.0 GPA in college, and you've been in the field for 5 to 7 years, it's probably time for that stuff to go. And if you don't have professional context in your work experience to take the place of that, you're going to need to spend some time focusing on your work experience bullets. All right, next slide, please. Skills. Okay, so there can be a lot of different skills sections on your resume. Some resume editors will break it out into like professional skills, technical acumen, blah, 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 blah. They'll break it out into a bunch of different skill sections by like programming languages or security tools or, you know, what soft skills, I hate that term, that you have professional skills, business skills. And that's fine. You can break the skills section up into multiple sections. I'm not going to tell you what those sections should be. Again, that's stylistic. But the important content things for me is, first of all, we talked about your work experience bullets. Anything that's a relevant skill that's in your work experience bullets should be somewhere in your skills section so I can find it quickly. The second question is, can you actually do all these things anymore? I see this all the time. People keep tacking onto their resumes for months or years or decades, and they just keep tacking more skills on. They don't remove them. And eventually the skills at the bottom of that list, they don't know how to do them anymore. So when it comes up in a resume, it's a really awkward moment during the interview because I work for a company that deals with a lot of legacy stuff. Okay. So I work in industrial control system security. So I really do run into like Windows NT and XP and like Slackware Linux. Like that's a thing that happens in my job. So if you have those things in your resume, I'm going to start asking you technical questions about them. Like, okay, in Windows NT, if you want to perform forensics on XYZ, what do you do? What tool do you use? I'm going to ask you that. That's not necessarily going to happen in every resume, in every interview at every company, for sure. But for me, yeah, that's absolutely relevant to the interview. So I'm going to ask. So you will have worked yourself into a corner, and I've had candidates do this by never taking those skills that you had 20 years ago off your resume if you don't keep them up to date and you can't do them anymore. So you need to do some soul searching there. Do you still really know how to do these things, and are they applicable to the job you're applying for? So in general, your skills section, once again, there's this keyword filtering that's going to be done on your resume. It's going to be done by the HR system. It's going to be done by HR personnel, and it's even going to be done by the hiring manager as they read through your resume. When you are writing your resume and getting ready to submit it to an application to a specific company, I highly recommend that you tune your skills section to the job posting you're applying for. I am not telling you to lie. Never lie in your resume, for God's sakes. I should have the big slide that just says that in here, but don't lie in your resume. But if there are skills that are called out in a specific way, in acronym or spelled out format in the job posting that you have, make sure that they're reflected in your skills section in that same verbiage, in that same format. So if they spell out DNS, then spell it out in your skills section. If they spell out certification names instead of using the acronyms, spell out the certification names. And if you forgot to add some general skills that they ask for in the posting, like maybe Word or Excel or something, make sure that you add those to your skills section if you know how to do them. So in general, always tune your skills section to the job you're applying for. Next slide, please. Things that I see a lot of people forget on their resumes in their skills section, especially when I'm doing clinics and I sit down with them. I'm like, you have like 5 skills here. Why do you have 5 skills? You've been doing this for a decade. So stuff that I see a lot of people forget, operating systems, including versions of those operating systems, because Windows means nothing to me when there's been 30 plus years of Windows. Well, operating systems plus versions or distros. So give me some specificity there. Vendors and tool names. So don't just put the vendor name. I see a lot of that. You put like Carbon Black. I'm like, so, or like Encase, like what tool, which one? There are like a bunch of products there and they're very different. So vendors and the tool names or the product names and the versions were applicable. So be specific. Make sure all the keywords are in there and you've actually defined what you can really do. General security concepts and technologies, if they're relevant to the posting. So, like firewall administration, et cetera, or vulnerability assessment or PCI. General networking concepts and technologies. So have you included like packet analysis, TCP/IP, things like that? Layer 2 analysis, OSI model, things like that, especially for junior people. Have you included that in your resume if you're good at it and you understand the technologies? Scripting languages. Usually people remember to do this, but sometimes I have to dig it out of them. Like, they're like, I'm not a programmer. And then I'm like, but do you do Python or do you do PowerShell? Like, did you put that in your resume? And they're like, oh, okay. Specific soft skills. And again, I hate that term, but anyway, it's going to go on here anyway. Soft skills as in your ability to do project management, your ability to write reports, etc. Those are relevant skills for cybersecurity. They're some of the most important skills for cybersecurity, which is why I hate them getting shoved aside as soft skills. But yes, those should absolutely be in your skills sections. And standards, if you're a HIPAA expert or a PCI expert, etc. Those should be included as well. Your skills section should really be a one-stop shop for me as a reviewer. I should be able to quickly look for things that I need a candidate to have and find them in that section. They should be easy to read, coherent, maybe even alphabetized or in some sensible relevance order. Work with your editor on that. That's really important. That's really the first place I go on most resumes. Next, please. Military experience. So quick review of military experience. Um, as I mentioned, I've spent over 20 years in the military and other reserves. And so I kind of get this, but not every hiring authority knows anything about the military at all. So I'll warn you about people who have been in the military and people who haven't been in the military as hiring managers if you are a veteran. First of all, nobody knows the acronyms except for other military people. And even we don't necessarily know all the acronyms because they like overlap and they conflict between different branches of services and stuff. So be really careful if you're throwing any acronyms, especially military or government acronyms in your resume. If people outside those communities aren't going to know what they mean, there's not going to be any context. It's not going to be meaningful. For the people who are hiring managers who are actually military veterans or reservists, guard, whatever, when you include like the list of the medals that you've received, I see people putting like the National Defense Service Medal and stuff on there. And like, we all know, like the people who have actually served in the military know those filler like time and service medals. Like, so if they're not really something that you've accomplished that are meaningful, a meaningful accomplishment to your career, it's probably not worth putting them on this list, this long list of medals, because we know, and they're not meaningful. The medals really, unless there's something really substantial, they're not going to be meaningful at all to civilian hiring managers who have never been in the military. So use some caution there. Keep your military experience relevant and comprehensible to both audiences. And absolutely do include things like PME. So if you went to like NCO, senior NCO leadership courses, definitely describe and list those. That management training is really great and really important. Training and documentation responsibilities, that's huge. Again, those are integral skills to cybersecurity, so they look really great. So include that stuff. And project management experience, as well as human management experience. Make sure that you include that stuff in your military experience, whether that's in work experience or in its own section on your resume. Again, so that's stylistic. It really depends on you and your career and your editor, but that's stuff that I'd like to see on there that a lot of military people forget to include. Next slide, please. If you are short on skills to put on your resume, or you don't have enough work experience, here are some things that you can include on your resume that would be awesome. So have you included your contributions to open source projects, volunteering at cybersecurity conferences, other relevant volunteer experience, so maybe non-controversial like things that you've done for the community, but that show leadership experience, et cetera. Cybersecurity meetup organization or coordination. There's tons of local groups, right? CTF competition awards and placement. Not necessarily that you just did it, but that you got some place that's meaningful in the CTF, or you got an award. Your speaking engagements, if you speak at conferences or seminars. If you've had publications, if you have bylines. So if you've written stuff and it's out there, definitely include that. Significant self-study efforts. So especially if you're a junior, it's okay to talk about like the lab you built or something, or project that you've been working to learn more about cybersecurity. That's okay. Maybe not for a mid-tier professional, but it's something to think about if you're entry level. Bounties, definitely, of course, CVEs. Relevant awards in cybersecurity or technology, and also additional languages. I see a lot of people forget to put those on their resume. They speak some other language, and that's fabulous, especially in our very global cybersecurity community. Next slide, please. How long is too long for your resume? As you look at your resumes here. So if you're junior to mid-tier, and I'm not going to tell you exactly how many years that is, but you know, first couple few years of your experience, your resume shouldn't be over a page long. Now, some resume editors and different trends in time will say your resume should always never be longer than 1 or 2 pages. Again, that's stylistic, but this is my kind of rule of thumb. Once you get to like a mid-tier senior level, like well after 5 years, it's okay to go to 2 pages to include relevant work experience if it's meaningful. And then when you get to an executive director or very senior principal level, you could consider going to 3 pages, but it's a lot. Again, that's a discussion to have with your resume editor. But if your resume is over these things that I just listed, for your level of experience in information security or cybersecurity, you probably have a problem, and I'm probably not going to read it all because I've just got too many resumes to review. So in general, be concise and strategic. Less is more in terms of resumes. Again, you're trying to write a narrative about yourself. And if you lose your audience along the way, it's not going to do any good for you. Next slide, please. Stuff to absolutely not do. This is my favorite slide. Don't do these things. Do not ever, in the United States, do not ever put a photo of yourself on your resume. Do not do it. Do not do it. Do not do it. Do not do it. Do not put a photo of yourself on your resume. In some other countries, it's required and expected. Okay, I'm talking about, again, United States and Canada. And yes, unless you are applying for a modeling gig, do not put a photo of yourself on your resume. I will often throw out resumes that have on them because I do not want to see the person I'm interviewing while I'm doing screening. I do not want to see race, gender, anything about you, affiliations on tattoos. I don't want to see any of that. I don't want to see that. I want to be blind reviewing candidates without bias. And that means I do not want to see your picture until you are sitting in front of me in an interview and you've already been screened. I do not want to see you. Okay. Sorry. I know your pictures are very nice. I love pictures of you with your puppies, but that is not the place. References available upon request. That's archaic. It's pointless. If I want your resumes, if I want your references for your resume, I will ask you for them, or the HR system will ask you for them. It's just redundant and silly. Like, of course, your references had better be available on request. And that includes listing your references. Like, again, if I want them, I'll ask for them. Wacky fonts and tables, we talked about this. They're not going to convert right. They're hard to read. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. All caps. Just so you're yelling on the internet again. Why? I've gotten resumes with huge sections in all caps, and it's like, this is so hard to read, and I don't understand why they're screaming at me. Military government resume format in the commercial US format, in the commercial US sector. Yeah, different formats. It's not appropriate. It's time to get it rewritten. Thank you. Everybody's gotten the point about the no photos. I see that in the chat. Super. Talking about marital status or children. Again, those are things like protected classes in some places. Don't talk about that. I can't ask you as a hiring authority. I don't want you to tell me. It might be apparent in like your volunteer work or something. That's the only place I should ever get a glimpse of that, ever. I shouldn't see your religion. I shouldn't see your marital status. I shouldn't see whether you have children or not. I shouldn't see any of those protected class type things on your resume, except under very, very specific and iffy circumstances. Unrelated hobbies and interests, especially if they reveal a protected class. Again, I want to review people blind. I don't want to know what protected group you're a part of. That's not appropriate. I want to interview you as a professional cybersecurity person. So again, don't put your hobbies and interests if they're going to give away if you're in one of those protected classes or you're not in one of those protected classes. Next page, please. So we've talked about a whole lot of stuff. I think we've got a little time for questions now, like 5 minutes. Is that right, David?
Oh, yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Super. So I wanted to leave some time today for you to ask your questions. Oh my God, we've got so many questions in the Q&A. So
would you like me to find some for you and ask, or you want to find your own?
Sure. What would you like to know? There's so many.
Well, I've been watching a whole bunch of them come up over and over again. So one of them is, where does one look for a certified resume editor, especially one that knows about cybersecurity?
So this knows about cybersecurity is really, really hard. I would suggest doing the two things that I've talked about previously, because the best resume editors who are really great at getting you through that HR filtering process know nothing about cybersecurity. When you start trying to find people who have both of those skill sets, you start having a problem. There's a few professional resume editor certifications in the United States. One of them is the CPRW. And you can definitely find people in your area who have that certification, or online if you want to use online service. I would recommend meeting somebody in person if possible, or at least over teleconference, so you can have a real discussion about your resume. But yeah, I recommend doing both things. I recommend finding the best resume editor, the general resume editor that you can find, who's certified, who has wonderful reviews, who knows how to get people through HR. And then also working with a mentor or going to a resume clinic that's specific to cybersecurity. Because to be really good at both of those things, to be really good at being a hiring manager in cybersecurity and also writing resumes, that's too much. You can't really be a pro at both of those things. And when you try to find somebody who's like semi good at both of them, you have problems on both fronts. So that's my recommendation there. What else?
Perfect. I guess time for one more, and it's kind of a synthesis of a bunch of ones that I think kind of cluster together.
Okay.
If you are maybe a student who has never worked in the field, or you're a career switcher who is switching, you've done work and you have some relevant experience, but not directly cybersecurity experience, how do you account for on your resume things like, I did cybersecurity volunteer work, or I took some self-guided classes, or even things like I did some things in GitHub or something like that, like things that aren't directly work experience but are work relevant.
Absolutely. I think I've included some of those, like on a couple slides back. I had the slide where I showed you all the stuff that you can include on your resume that you're forgetting to. It is absolutely okay to talk about volunteer work and community participation. In fact, you can have a section in your resume that's called something like community participation or volunteer work, etc. Those are valid sections for your resume where you can talk about stuff like that. Like I mentioned, it's perfectly great to put your GitHub at the top of your resume with your contact information if you've got relevant projects or contributions there. But yeah, I highly encourage you to put that stuff on your resume. If you do like a volunteer work section or a self-study section, again, talk to your editor about the formatting of that and the title of that. But that's definitely stuff I want to read as an editor.
Wow, that was perfect. Thank you very much for this session. I've been in the industry for decades, and I learned that I'm doing my resumes wrong now. So thank you very much. It was kind of like a fire hose of
I'm sorry, it's a lot.
Professional. No, it was a fire hose of good professional advice, actionable tips, and everything. And I think it's going to help a lot of people get that first job. So I very much appreciate you.
Thank you.
Having
Thanks
taken
for
the
having
time
me.
to talk to us.